The morning they called my house an eyesore was the morning I stopped being silent. 3 sharp knocks broke the stillness, not the polite kind, but the kind that carried judgment. I opened the door, and there she was, Evelyn Sharp, the HOA president, her beige suit too perfect for our dusty street. Behind her stood 2 board members, eyes fixed on my porch as if they'd stepped into a crime scene. "Mr. Blackwell," she began, her voice smooth but sharp at the edges. "We've had several complaints. Your property doesn't fit our community aesthetic." I followed her gaze, the porch swing my father built, the faded paint, the vines curling along the brick like memories that refused to die. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. Then she handed me the envelope. Neatly folded. Stamped. Lifeless. Notice of violation. I didn't even have to open it to feel the insult inside. 30 days to correct the issue or face fines. 30 days to erase my father's legacy in the name of uniformity. That night, I sat on that same porch, the one they called ugly, and stared at the wood my father's hands once sanded smooth. Every mark on this place told our story, a story of work, of pride, of staying when the world told us to leave. But to the HOA, none of that mattered. To them, history didn't belong here unless it matched their paint chart. I felt something shift in me, not rage, not yet, but something deeper. A slow-burning certainty. They wanted me to repaint my past. I was going to repaint their future. The next morning, I drove down to the county office. The clerk didn't even look up when I asked for the HOA codebook. She just pointed to a dusty binder that looked older than the building itself. And there it was, hidden in fine print, a single clause that would change everything. Decorative or artistic exterior alterations permitted if consistent with local cultural expression or heritage art. Heritage art. 3 little words. My father's voice echoed in my head, a man's house should speak for him, even when he can't. That night, I pulled out the old paint cans from the shed, reds, blues, browns, leftovers from projects long gone. The smell hit me like memory, raw and familiar. I started sketching on the walls under the moonlight, letting instinct guide my hand. Faces. Hands. Symbols of our story. Not rebellion. Remembrance. When dawn came, light touched the walls, and the mural came alive, my ancestors rising from color, their eyes fierce and proud. The house that once looked tired now breathed again. I stepped back, brush still wet, heart pounding. I'd never felt peace like that. Until I heard the sound of heels. Evelyn Sharp stood in the driveway, her sunglasses reflecting the colors of my wall like she was staring at a crime scene. Her face tightened, jaw trembling. "What have you done?" she whispered. I wiped the sweat from my brow. "You said it didn't fit your community's aesthetic," I said. "So I made sure it fit ours." Her lips parted, shock, then fury. "This isn't allowed. You can't." But I didn't let her finish. "Actually, I can." Heritage Art Clause, Section 4.2. Her expression froze. The clipboard in her hand lowered an inch. She turned, stiff and silent, walking back to her car. I watched her drive away, dust rising behind her tires, and smiled for the first time in weeks. Because my house didn't look broken anymore. It looked free. That night, as I sat under the porch light, my phone began to buzz. 1 notification. Then 10. Then hundreds. Someone had posted a picture of my mural online. By midnight, my home wasn't just a home anymore, it was the start of something much bigger. The letter on my door. By sunrise, my house wasn't just a home anymore, it was a headline. I woke to the sound of voices outside, not the quiet chatter of neighbors, but the electric buzz of curiosity. When I pulled back the curtain, a dozen strangers stood on the sidewalk, phones in hand, cameras pointed at the mural. Someone had posted it online the night before. By morning, it had gone viral. The caption read, Veteran's son paints his heritage after HOA calls his home an eyesore. It had thousands of shares before breakfast. A local news van parked across the street. Kids posed for selfies in front of my wall. A woman left flowers on my porch with a note, "Thank you for giving us something real to look at." For the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. But not everyone was smiling. By noon, a letter appeared under my door, this time handwritten, not typed. The pen had pressed too hard, the anger bleeding through the paper. Remove the unauthorized mural immediately or face legal consequences. I laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. Because I'd already seen what they didn't want me to. That heritage clause, the one buried deep in the HOA's own rules, had caught the attention of the State Cultural Council. They'd called me personally. They wanted to feature my mural in their upcoming Black Heritage in the South exhibition. So when Evelyn Sharp and her board marched up my driveway later that day, red-faced and rattling papers, I didn't say a word. I just handed her an envelope with the state seal embossed in gold. "This mural," I said evenly, "has been officially recognized by the state as cultural art. Any attempt to alter or remove it will be considered destruction of public heritage property." The look on her face was worth every sleepless night. Her lips trembled, eyes darting between the letter, the mural, and the small crowd filming the whole scene. Behind her, someone whispered, "He's got them good." For a long moment, Evelyn just stood there, her perfect control cracking under the weight of a truth she couldn't bury. Then she turned and walked away without a word. That evening, the sunset made the mural glow. The faces I'd painted seemed alive, watching, proud, almost smiling. My phone buzzed non-stop. Reporters. Activists. Artists. Even strangers from other states thanking me for standing up to those people. I wanted to be proud. I wanted to believe this was the victory my father would have smiled at. But pride has a strange way of attracting shadows. Late that night, I heard something outside, a faint hum. When I stepped onto the porch, a drone hovered above my house, lights blinking red. It tilted, filmed the wall, then vanished into the dark. My stomach tightened. The next morning, I found a note taped to my mailbox. "Your little stunt is costing people property value. Take it down before someone does it for you." No name. No signature. Just a message soaked in cowardice. I looked at the mural, at the faces of my ancestors staring back at me, half lit by morning light, and I knew what they would have said. "Don't back down." So I didn't. Instead, I installed new cameras, brighter lights, and an iron lock on the gate. The HOA wanted silence. They were about to get a spotlight. That night, as I scrolled through the comments online, one message caught my eye, short, professional, and promising. "I'm Marcus Lee, civil rights attorney. They broke more laws than you think. Call me." I didn't know it yet, but that message was the moment everything changed. Because the fight had just become legal. When the whole town looked my way. It happened 3 nights later. A Thursday. Quiet, windless, and heavy with that kind of silence that makes your chest tighten before you even know why. I was upstairs, sketching new ideas for the next mural, something my father used to say, "Even scars can be beautiful if you learn to paint them right." That's when I heard it. A crack. Then another. Glass. I froze. The house had a heartbeat now, slow, deliberate, wrong. By the time I made it to the porch, the night had already swallowed them. 3 figures. Dark hoodies. One carrying a spray can. The others, bats. They weren't just vandalizing. They were erasing. Thick black paint smeared across faces I'd spent weeks bringing to life. The image of my father's smile, gone under one brutal stroke. Another face, my great-grandmother's, covered in red slashes. It felt like watching history burn. I shouted, but they didn't stop. One of them turned, his mask glinting under the porch light, and threw the can toward me. Should have listened to the HOA, boy. The word boy hit harder than the can ever could. They ran. Tires screeched, engine roared, gone. For a moment, I just stood there in the smell of fresh paint and gasoline, fists clenched, chest heaving, the mural dripping black tears down the wall. Then I looked up, straight at my camera. They hadn't seen it. By morning, the footage was online. It spread faster than the mural ever had. News anchors called it a hate crime. Protesters showed up before noon. Evelyn Sharp tried to issue a neutral statement, but her face on TV said everything: panic, guilt, and fear. Then came Marcus. He pulled up in a gray sedan, clean suit, calm eyes. When he spoke, it wasn't with sympathy, it was strategy. They trespassed, destroyed property, and used hate speech. That's 3 separate charges. But the HOA, they're the real target. I frowned. You think they're behind it? Marcus smiled, the kind of smile that knows the truth already. I think they didn't stop it. Which, in this state, is the same thing. He wasn't just talking about paint and walls. He was talking about dignity, the kind that doesn't wash off. We spent the next 2 days gathering proof. Security footage. Letters. Witnesses. Even text messages leaked from an HOA group chat, one of the board members bragging about sending a message to the artist. Marcus looked at the evidence, leaned back, and said, "They built their power on paper. We'll bury them with it." The lawsuit was filed that afternoon. Harassment, discrimination, emotional distress, property damage, and cultural violation. It was all over the news by nightfall. But the HOA wasn't done. That evening, I found something on my doorstep. A single envelope. No return address. Inside was a picture of me, standing outside my own house, taken from across the street. On the back, a message scrawled in red marker. "You don't belong here." For a long time, I just stared at it. The edges of the photo trembled in my hand, but I didn't tear it. I pinned it to the wall beside my father's portrait, right above the cracked frame. Because now, it wasn't just my fight anymore. It was ours. That night, I sat on the porch until dawn, watching the mural dry under new lights. The damage was still there, but somehow, it looked alive. Every scar. Every mark. Every stroke of defiance. And as the morning sun broke over the roofs of the neighborhood that once called my home an eyesore, I made myself a promise. If they wanted to make me disappear, I'll make sure they never forget me instead. The night they tried to erase me. The courtroom was packed. News cameras lined the walls. Reporters whispered. And at the center of it all, me, sitting behind my lawyer, watching the same people who once called me unfit for the neighborhood squirm in their iron suits. Evelyn Sharp sat 2 rows ahead, jaw tight, eyes fixed on the floor. She looked smaller now, not like the woman who once strutted up my driveway with threats in her hand, but like someone who'd finally realized the empire she built was cracking from underneath. Marcus leaned over, whispered. "They'll try to settle. Don't flinch." I didn't. The HOA's lawyer stood, voice smooth but shaking. He spoke about property values, community standards, mutual respect. Every word sounded like another coat of paint over the truth. Then Marcus stood. Calm. Controlled. Dangerous in the way quiet storms are. He placed the printed HOA chat logs on the judge's desk. Exhibit D, messages from the board referring to my client's home as a stain, reminder of what used to live here, and a blight on the street. Gasps filled the room. Someone in the back muttered, "Damn." Evelyn's hands clenched in her lap. The judge's voice cut through the noise like a blade. "Ms. Sharp, did you approve this discussion?" Her lips parted, nothing came out. Marcus didn't wait. He flipped another page. And here's Mr. Coulson, board member, confirming they knew of the vandalism before it happened. He writes, and I quote, "Don't worry, it'll send a message. He'll take it down himself after this." Every word landed like a hammer. The silence that followed wasn't peace. It was pressure. The kind that crushes the guilty before the verdict even falls. When the hearing ended, I walked out into a swarm of microphones. Reporters shouting questions. Do you think it was racially motivated? How much are you suing for? What message do you want to send? I paused, staring straight into the nearest camera. This was never about money. This was about respect, something you can't fine, threaten, or erase with paint. It aired that night. By morning, the entire country had seen it. Support poured in, letters, calls, donations. A local artist collective even volunteered to restore the mural for free. But something felt unfinished. Because while the HOA crumbled in court, I still drove home every night to the same quiet street, the same glares through half-closed blinds, the same feeling that the war wasn't over. And then, one evening, Marcus showed up again. This time, no suit, just jeans, a coffee in hand, and that same half-smile that always meant bad news delivered softly. "You might want to sit for this," he said, laying down a file. Inside, property records. Deeds. Maps. Half the HOA board, including Evelyn Sharp, had been involved in a secret plan to rezone part of the neighborhood. They'd been using the HOA's fines and beautification fees to buy up smaller homes, quietly flipping them for profit. My house? It sat right in the middle of their expansion zone. They didn't just hate how it looked. They hated that they couldn't own it. They called your home an eyesore, Marcus said, because it blocked their view of greed. I sat there, silent, the weight of it settling in my chest. For a moment, all I could see was my father's hands, calloused, steady, building this place board by board, refusing to sell it even when times got hard. Now I understood why they wanted it gone so badly. They weren't protecting a neighborhood. They were protecting a secret. That night, I made a choice. No more defense. No more silence. If they wanted to play games with property and pride, I'd play too. Only this time, I'd win where they'd never expect it. The plan was already forming. Quiet. Sharp. Legal. I'd hit them right where it hurt, their land. And by the time they realized what I was doing, it would already be too late. The truth buried beneath their law. They thought the last move would be theirs, a quiet paper signed in the dark. They didn't count on me learning how to play the same game. The plain envelope on my doorstep had been a chisel at my pride for days. Whoever had left it, anonymous, tidy handwriting, wanted to remind me of something I already knew like a bruise: the property still isn't yours. I kept the note pinned to the fridge, right beside my father's yellowed service photograph. I read it every morning and every night because it kept me honest. It reminded me that victory would not be a headline or a courtroom order, it would be a change that lived in deeds and maps and law. Marcus visited with a stack of papers thicker than any I'd seen. He'd already moved faster than the state, drafting claims, complex filings, and one quiet, brilliant thing: a petition to declare my house and mural a protected cultural landmark. If approved, it would prevent any forced sale, rezone, or demolition without state-level review. It would put a legal wall around the history painted on my bricks. We'll need community support, Marcus said. Neighbors, local artists, the cultural council, and one final push. We set to work like men in a workshop. I signed statements. Artists signed letters. Veterans and neighbors showed up with pens and stories, not because they wanted drama, but because they remembered what it felt like to belong. A petition gathered so many names it ran out of paper. Photographers, bloggers, even a small documentary crew came to film the mural's restoration. Meanwhile, the HOA's world gasped under the weight of subpoenas, indictments, and betrayed partners. Their rezoning plan lay exposed, maps, secret emails, and bank trails Marcus had dug up like bones from a shallow grave. Developers backed away. Banks froze accounts. Evelyn tried one last desperate move, a private sale offer to the new developer who still pretended not to know her family ties. He refused. The evidence was a wildfire. Nobody wanted to burn with them. The hearing to designate the house as a cultural landmark was set on a rainy Tuesday. I remember standing in the back of the packed municipal hall, the mural's fresh colors bleeding through the windows like a promise. When I spoke, I didn't speak for myself. I spoke for my father, for the hands that built this porch, and for the faces pinned on my wall. They wanted this gone because they couldn't own what they couldn't control. This house holds a story our neighborhood needs, not because it's pretty, but because it's true. The council voted nearly unanimous. I felt the word approved like a warm hand on my shoulder. The legal protections kicked in immediately, the HOA's rezoning route died on the spot. The anonymous envelope's taunt, "The property still isn't yours," was finally answered by a louder truth: the property belonged to its history, and its history belonged to the people. After the hearing, the neighborhood changed. Not like a fairy tale makeover overnight, but like the slow, steady mending of a fence. People who had once whispered now stopped to talk. Some apologized awkwardly, some avoided my eye, and a few, the ones who had never had the courage, offered coffee and a handshake. The artist collective rebuilt the mural stronger, layering the old with new meaning, faces, names, dates, and a plaque that explained why the wall mattered. Kids painted a tiny border, their initials tucked into corners like little promises. Evelyn's resignation came next, public and silent. The indictments followed. She moved away, leaving behind a house that looked the same but belonged to a future that had learned its lesson. The HOA dissolved under investigations and civil suits, their archive of fines scattered across courtrooms. That summer, the city asked me to open the yard once a month for school tours, lessons on local history, art, and civic courage. I agreed. My father's porch chair became a place where kids sat to hear the story of a man who painted to remember, not to rebel. I taught them about paint, but I also taught them about standing still when powers try to move you. On a slow afternoon, Marcus came by with 2 cups of coffee and the same half-smile. He handed me a thin envelope. Inside was a simple deed copy, a small, legal victory, a covenant that made the house part of a community trust. I wasn't alone in ownership anymore. The house belonged to a foundation we formed, run by neighbors and artists, protected so that no one else could decide its fate with a checkbook. I walked out to the porch and sat where my father used to sit. The mural's colors shimmered in the late light. The street hummed, children playing, a couple walking a dog, someone mowing a lawn. The old note's voice, "You don't belong here," had become a memory as faded as a used paintbrush. I touched the plaque beneath the mural, fingers tracing names, and felt my father's presence like summer heat on my neck. He had built this house from nothing, and in the end, nothing could take it away. When night came, the mural caught the porch light and glowed like a beacon. I thought of every small, stubborn thing that kept me standing: the porch swing, the paint cans with dried handles, the courthouse room with its blinking cameras, and realized the last stroke had never been on the wall. It was the one I'd made by refusing to leave. They called my house an eyesore. The state called it a landmark. And the people, the ones who mattered, called it home.